Minnesota lawmakers have finally reached the outline of a deal to end the longest government shutdown in that state's history. It had closed state parks, cut off funding for many social services, and placed 22,000 state employees out of work temporarily. Ephraim Graham has the story.
It's a budget battle that sounds a lot like the stalemate in Washington. On one side, Minnesota's Democratic Governor Mark Dayton wanted to raise taxes on the richest Minnesota residents. On the other side, Republicans who refused to support any tax hikes. In the end, the governor didn't get any new taxes.
I'm disappointed that I wasn't able to persuade a legislative majority of the wisdom of my approach to raising taxes on the wealthiest Minnesotans, but I have 3.5 years left of my term, and I will continue to try to make that case to Minnesota.
Minnesota's top 3 budget negotiators left the governor's office Thursday with the framework of a deal that did include more spending than Republicans wanted, and no one left happy.
We have a framework agreement, I guess is the best way to look at it.
Republicans won their push not to raise taxes, and leaders still found a way to get the $1.4 billion the governor wanted for spending. Some will come from education, and the rest will come from the sale of bonds tied to tobacco lawsuit settlement funds.
It was about making sure that we get a deal that we all can be disappointed in, but it's a deal that is done, a budget that will be balanced, a state that will be back to work.
In the end, both sides agreed that compromise meant disappointment, but it does bring the state's longest shutdown in history to an end. Ephraim Graham, CBN News.
Lawmakers in Washington are working on a compromise to avoid a possible default, and the pressure is building for Congress to reach a deal. The credit rating agency Standard & Poor's says there's a 50% chance it will downgrade the U.S. government's credit rating within 3 months because of the stalemate over approving an increase in the debt ceiling. Today, debt ceiling negotiations have shifted to Capitol Hill, but there's still a fundamental disagreement over raising taxes.
I've said I'm willing to make very tough spending cuts. I'm willing to make modifications to entitlements like Medicare and Medicaid. And I've said in return, let's make sure that folks like myself, who have been extraordinarily blessed, are contributing to the sacrifices that are necessary.
Republicans will not be reduced to being the tax collectors for the Obama economy.
Congress is looking at 3 deficit reduction plans to see if any could pass the House and Senate. California will become the first state to require public schools to teach gay and lesbian history. Governor Jerry Brown signed the bill Thursday. The law mandates information about homosexual and transgender Americans be included in social studies curriculum and in textbooks. Critics say it could lead to more parents pulling their children out of public schools in California. A short film had a high-profile showing on Capitol Hill Thursday. It documents the near genocide of Iraq's ancient Assyrian Christian civilization. Paul Strand has the story from Washington.
Congressmen and media mixed with Assyrians anxious to plead their cause at this showing of defying deletion. It highlights how other Iraqis have systematically targeted the Assyrian Christians who've called Iraq their homeland for thousands of years. More than half have fled.
That's 600,000.
Andre Anton is the 26-year-old director of the fast-paced Defying Deletion.
There's a lot of shootings, there's a lot of bombings. Churches have been bombed. I would say over 60 churches have been bombed.
The filmmaker says extremists often go after Assyrian priests.
They want to instill fear into the rest of the population, so what better way to do it than actually kidnap and kill somebody that's meaningful and powerful.
The film points out other Iraqis are out to grab the homes, lands, and resources of the Assyrians among them, but the main reason for the persecution is the Assyrians' Christianity.
That's why they're getting attacks from these extremists, who are saying, okay, these are Christians like the Americans. Let's, show them what we think of them.
This is all very personal for Anton, whose family is in America only because of the 33 attempted genocides against his people over the last 1,400 years.
I'm one of the hundreds of thousands of Assyrians that have been born here because of the constant persecution.
Anton and his fellow Assyrians hope that America will use its influence to push for an actual Assyrian homeland in Iraq, or at least more protections for these beleaguered Christians. Paul Strand, CBN News, Washington.
Kids' meals are getting a little healthier. The National Restaurant Association has developed a voluntary program called Kids Live Well. So far, 15,000 restaurants have joined, including Burger King, Cracker Barrel, Chili's, and IHOP. Each meal includes an entree, side dish, and beverage with only 600 calories or less. A Little League park in Joplin, Missouri is almost ready to be used again thanks to Operation Blessing. Sunny Gym Park was wiped out by the Joplin tornado. Operation Blessing teamed with the Home Depot to renovate the park. Teams fixed fences, removed broken poles, and reconstructed an entire outfield wall. The goal is to have the park finished by the Little League closing ceremonies later this month. You can find out more by going to ob.org.